Hey guys, welcome back to Franchise Tagged. It's mock time. Real quick disclaimer, this mock is being recorded Monday the 11th. It is currently 9:30 p.m. Central Time. We have seen most of the first day of free agent signings, as long as nothing happens after this. And we won't be changing much in this mock, but we will be using some things to justify if they fit. But next mock draft will be with some of the biggest free agent names off the board. But let's get into this before we waste too much time. First off, we got the Bears at number 1 going with Caleb Williams, quarterback out of USC. He is, for all intents and purposes, a generational quarterback prospect, and the Bears have a decent offense that they have built for a quarterback. I would still personally love to see them keep Justin Fields, but everything is just telling me that they won't be, and that they will be going with Caleb at number 1. And I can't really blame them if they do. I would just like to see Fields get his shot. And with the way that free agent quarterbacks have gone, I don't know if he will get a shot this season, at least.
Yeah, the certain teams that are making their quarterback signings is kind of dwindling down. Who could possibly be wanting to trade for Justin Fields? So I feel like, honestly, right now, Justin Fields riding the bench as a backup could be a possibility. Or who knows, maybe they sit Caleb. Ha 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 ha. Anyways, next up is going to be the Commanders picking, and again, it's kind of a up in the air. We've changed it some mocks, but we still have it being Drake May as of now, who's kind of just QB2 in the draft, and he could sit maybe behind Howell, just make Howell get beat up by that O-line some more and take those hits for May so he's not taking them early in the year. But maybe that's not really like something they'll consider. But hey, you got 2 UNC quarterbacks. I would let him let the team develop and maybe give yourself a tank year, but that's not really something that teams buy into in the year.
Yeah, it was more of just like a, Drake May said that it would be beneficial to sit a year. So if they really want to, they could, I guess, give Sam Howell another shot, but I genuinely don't think they will.
Yeah.
At 3, the Patriots, I've got taken Jaden Daniels. They could go Marvin Harrison. It's very possible, but I think that trading Mac Jones was the nail in the coffin, and that they're 100% going QB at 3. Their de facto GM, Elliott Wolf, has gushed over this QB class. Gerard Mayo said they're going to be taking a big position of importance at 3. Everything is pointing to quarterback, and Jaden Daniels is clearly the best on the board. Do not come at me with JJ McCarthy, who would be better at 3. And then moving on to 4, the Cardinals are thrilled that a lot of people's top prospects, and honestly, my most surefire prospect, Marvin Harrison Jr., is still available for them, and I think they'd take him. And then I also think it's a good situation for Marvin to go to a team that doesn't really have a QB problem. Like Kyler isn't like a top 5 QB in the league, but he's not like bottom half of the league. He is talented. He's got an arm. He's got legs. He can move. And I think giving him weapons is the key to getting him back to his full potential. And Marvin Harrison Jr. is certainly a weapon.
Yep. I just want to touch on those past 2 picks just because it's, it's some discourse that we probably wouldn't put in a video outside of a mock draft, but Patriots trade for Justin Fields, draft Marvin Harrison Jr. How what are your sheets when you wake up in the morning?
I've thought about it, and I wouldn't be mad at it, but
it's not as good as an option of having a 4-year quarterback deal.
That's the only problem, because I see Jaden Daniels and Justin Fields in a very similar light. They're both really reckless runners with strong arms, and Jaden Daniels is a single year younger than Justin Fields. That's something I don't think a lot of people realize, that coming into the league 4 years later, he is 1 year younger than Fields.
Yeah.
But I think that if we get Jaden Daniels, the door is open for Brandon Ayuk to come to the Patriots through a trade, because they played together at ASU when Jaden Daniels was there. And I don't know if that's like if drafting Jaden Daniels gets us Ayuk. I don't think it does, but I think that it kind of at least opens the door a little bit more to having Ayuk ask for a trade, want to go to New England, he'd be the one, and he'd be reunited with a college quarterback who he has, I think, publicly said he likes. So
Yeah. Okay, that out of the way. At pick 5, we have the Chargers going with Malik Neighbors. Um, Once again, we aren't making we're making a little change here, spicing it up and not having Brock Bowers go at 5. They I've been seeing even some people say Malik Neighbors over Marvin Harrison. I'm not, buying into that. So this order of wide receivers is great, and as they kind of look to replace their old guard in Keenan and Mike, they will have a top 5 selection at wide receiver to do so, and not let like the wide receivers slip and be like, oh well, we don't want the second wide receiver at 5. They don't care. It's the value of the wide receiver to the team. It's not that they didn't get Marvin, so they're not going to draft wide receiver. That's going on here. And next up, we have the Giants, who, while we could have them take any number of positions here because it is a void of a team and they can't add anything reliably through the draft, we are going to have them take a trade down here as another team is jumping up with optimal draft compensation for them to take this. And we're going to have the Jets moving up. So the Jets are going to be moving up to select Joe Alt, while we could have them go and see them taking like Bakhtiari in free agency as he was cut today. We have them instead not targeting like, oh yeah, this is the guy that guarded Aaron Rodgers. We want him because no, they want a 4-year starter on a rookie contract, not Bakhtiari with his contract.
and his health.
Yeah.
Played 13 games in the past 3 years, something like that.
Oh, something real bad.
But yeah, the other thing they'd be doing is jumping some offensive tackle needy teams with that trade up from 10 to 6, namely the Titans, who at 7, after seeing Joe Alt jump off the board, I think they would still want to put their quarterback, Will Levis, in the best position possible. And without a top tackle talent on the board to do that, I think they'd rather take a talented receiver in Rome Odunze and kind of look to give Mayo Man some lethal weapons and some talented outside help. While they still do need offensive line, I feel like the offensive line class is honestly pretty deep, and obviously the receiver class is too. But if you're not getting Alt, I think you would rather have either a trade back or take a different position here.
Yeah. I think that with kind of the top end of the wide receivers, I think taking the third wide receiver here is a better option than taking a tackle here and a wide receiver in the second, just based off like the depth that I am aware of. Next up is the Falcons at pick 8. We have been having Dallas Turner be the pick here for, I think, probably any draft we had them select at 8. Here we have them selecting Jared Verse, just kind of, it could be 1A, 1B in the Falcons head front office. And so we are just kind of given that little spice, seeing how the boards fall from here on out, based on just one little domino to fall here. So while, certainly a lot of talk for Dallas to be the first off the board, who did the Commanders draft as the first corner off the board? Or sorry, it was second after Devin.
Emmanuel Forbes.
Yeah, so see, that doesn't always come to fruition in the draft.
Yeah, they let Gonzo slip to the Patriots. Thank you so much, whoever the hell the GM of the Commanders was. I assume was, because there's no way you keep your job after that. But anywho, at 9, we've got the Bears sitting here, and there's a lot of talk about them wanting Caleb at 1 and a receiver at 9. And I agree, but I don't think they would still take a receiver with the top 3 off the board. So we actually are going to have them trading back with the Broncos, who are going to be able to jump 2 QB needy teams that are picking directly in front of them in the Giants and Vikings, and select JJ McCarthy in the top 10. I hate doing it, but based on the buzz at the combine and basically everything we've heard from the league at this point, it's the most likely scenario for JJ to also be a top pick in the draft. And I think the Broncos, obviously they cut Russell Wilson. They don't really have a second option. So with how weak this free agent QB class is and how they haven't made a move yet, I think they need to at least secure JJ, because I don't think they want to be heading into round 2 without a quarterback on their team and be like just being nervous about if Penix's name is called, if Bo Nix's name is called towards the end of the first round rather than the second where they may think they'd go.
Yeah, and I think another thing we had spoken on in a different mock draft was that the Broncos have a certain inclination to drafting quarterbacks of a certain color. And so JJ McCarthy trade up seems just perfect here.
JJ McCarthy, you're stick and pick Knicks, baby.
Yep. Next up is the Giants after their trade back with the Jets, and we have them selecting J.C. Latham. While we're still having them take a tackle, we're having them take a tackle on the opposite side. Andrew Thomas is definitely competent enough to stay on his side, and maybe Joe Alt isn't a guy that they want to have flip sides. So we have them kind of just moving back and taking the top right tackle in their book. Fuaga is definitely up there for this, but Fuaga is also kind of getting some of that guard talk where, okay, we might see him as a prospect that moves inside because of his athleticism and his speed and his shorter arms. While meanwhile Latham is like pure tackle prospect. They want someone who's going to be a pure tackle. That's what they trade back and they select.
I also think that Latham has gotten a lot more top 10 hype as the combine and as the draft process has gone on. And then I also another thing that you had mentioned is they may take Alt and shift him, but the problem with Evan Neal is that he was taken and shifted sides, so they may have a little bit of some demons from that, you know. PTSD is the word I was looking for. They may have some PTSD from the Evan Neal move and prefer a pure right tackle to play right tackle for them. Next up at 11, the Vikings, we have taking Dallas Turner, ending his small slip. And they obviously lost Daniil Hunter to free agency, or at least he hasn't signed yet, but it's very likely that he does not return to Minnesota. And they did grab Jonathan Greenard, who I am rather high on, but there's 2 edge positions on every team. And I think that pairing Dallas Turner with Jonathan Greenard, especially with how aggressive they are with their blitzes, I think would be a good decision for them. Obviously, DB is an option here if they want to protect the back end when they're being aggressive. But I think just being successful when you blitz by having talented edge rushers is a more surefire way to execute effective blitzes.
Yeah, we've had them taking corners, but you already saw the first edge go, and it wasn't Dallas Turner. I don't see how you can't take Dallas Turner here. Next up is the Bears after their trade back with the Broncos. We discussed that they were probably eyeing a wide receiver at 9, and while they could have done this there, they get to finesse some extra picks out of a quarterback needy team, because if you trade up for a quarterback, it's always at a premium. And so they take that trade back, they take that extra capital, and they go ahead and they draft Adonai Mitchell. This is probably the shocker of our mock draft, I would say. The top 12 wide receiver pick of Adonai Mitchell with 4 wide receivers in the top 12. But I mean, he's definitely my favorite of that next tier of wide receivers. And when they're at 9 and they are targeting like, okay, we want some weapons to pair with this, we're adding so much through FA right now that they're being hungry, and they are going to be pursuing a top of the division end ranking here, playoffs bound, all of that. I think Adonai Mitchell is a great pickup for them here.
Yeah, I think especially just like after the combine, I think Adonai Mitchell shot his stock up into the stratosphere because his tagline was never speed. Like he was fast, like that you could see that on tape, but it was never his main thing. That was Xavier Worthy's main thing. And so his 40 time, it's cool, but it's not like a propel you into the top 10 kind of thing. But Adonai Mitchell running a really fast 40 time while also looking good at the catch point, while also running solid routes all throughout tape and all throughout the year, I think just really propels him and puts him almost in that top tier of receiver where he could be I don't think he's competing with Odunze or Neighbors, but I think he's closer to that tier than he is to
The Troy
the next tier
Franklin,
down. If
yeah,
that's
yeah,
yeah,
I see what you mean.
that may be a bit bold because Troy Franklin and Brian Thomas really didn't hurt themselves much at the combine. But
Yeah. Next up, pick 13 is the Raiders. We have them selecting Terrion Arnold, DB out of Alabama. And so without, quarterback really being a possibility here, um, and with the newly signed interior D line interior D line addition of Christian Wilkins, we don't have them targeting kind of what we've had them target in the past. And we're going instead with Terry and Arnold, just kind of add a name alongside Nate Hobbs because the DB room is slim in Las Vegas. So being able to pair a ball hawk and a game changer as the first corner off the board at 13 when they have all of their picks in front of them, they get to pick their favorite. I think that this would be their move. He feels like a Raiders kind of guy.
yeah, at 14 we've got the Saints taking Olu Fashanu, the offensive tackle out of Penn State. He is a pure left tackle, and he's the I know for a while he was kind of the top tackle prospect on some people's boards, and I think he's kind of fallen out of that now, and it's more of Latham, Fuaga, and definitely Alt over him. And I think, like you said, Fuaga projecting more as a guard than a tackle, I think helps Fashanu's stock boost up, and they would be signing him to replace Andrews Pete, who they would be losing to free agency.
Yep.
And then And then at 15, we've got the Colts taking another DB off the board. This time, Quinyon Mitchell, the DB out of Toledo. It's so tempting when we're doing these to just keep giving them Cooper DeJean. Like we talked about it for probably 15 minutes, just like,
Yeah.
do we give him DeJean? Do we move on? Do we do something else? But I think having a combine riser, kind of like Adonai Mitchell, boost his draft stock enough to just shoot him up into the next tier of picks is something that happens realistically in the NFL every year in the draft.
Yeah.
So somebody like Quinyon Mitchell, who ran really well and performed really well at the combine, boosting his stock to be, a top 15 pick instead of maybe a top 30 pick, I think makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I think with the Colts and the Falcons, especially, there was just kind of this like, I guess you would call it prospect fatigue from our own perspective of like, okay, we don't want to keep having this same thing happen. We want to be able to go in a similar route that isn't going to be too outlandish. We're not trying to shift the entire boards. We just kind of want to make, a possible change as to who they might be pursuing in the draft as their top guy. So, you know, if you really want Cooper DeJean and you really want Dallas Turner, go watch our other mock drafts and see that we have them go there and that we have reasonings for their moves. But right now it's kind of just like, all right, let's give some spice to each mock draft. We'll try to make everything a little bit more unique. And so next up at pick 16, here's a little bit of that uniqueness with the Seahawks. They re-signed Noah Fant. So while we were talking about this mock draft, we kind of had Brock Bowers as a possibility here after his slippage. Um, Instead, we're going to be adding to that interior O line, and this is going to be Talise Fuaga, the possible interior O line guy who could also play outside, outside O line tackle. That's the word. Who could play offensive tackle for them if there was injury or performance issues along any of the O line. He can kind of slot in as needed. And then next up, the Jaguars. The Jaguars went on a little bit of a spending spree, and not by big contracts, but by many contracts with wide receivers. Gabe Davis, Devin Duvernay are both, good signings for the team, but they're not top end that we've seen. We kind of want them to we don't know that they're ones. So you add Brian Thomas and you add just like a bigger group of weapons that can maybe shuffle in and out. And Brian Thomas is where we have them going. And they really round out their pass catching group for Trevor Lawrence after the season that was last season, where they kind of have they're in a similar situation where they're adding a lot of these next tier guys, but Brian Thomas could just have that nice little gap year after like Gabe Davis and stuff like that to develop.
Yeah. At 18 is where we have the Bengals ending Brock Bowers' slide, and they're taking him. They don't really have a ton of offensive need outside of maybe some O-line help. But with Brock Bowers on the board and the Bengals not having a bona fide dog at tight end, I think it kind of makes sense. It's not as much of a need-based pick as it is just like an opportunistic pick, where they see this talented guy that they may have thought was going in the top 10 or top 5, like we've had him for a while. And then they see him just continuously slip and they're like, oh my God, he's going to be there at 18. Why wouldn't we take him? It's kind of like the Patriots with Gonzo last year.
Yeah.
I don't think corner was a huge need for them last year. Maybe it was, but I think they've always kind of scrapped together a cornerback group and been good. But when you see a prospect that you kind of have graded in that top 10 range and you see him slipping down to near 20, you kind of take notice and you're like, all right, let's just take him. We'll figure out whatever else we need to do. And I think that's what the Bengals would do here.
Yeah. I think that the Bengals, if not for Brian Thomas being gone, depending on T. Higgins' request for a trade, that could be something. But Brock Bowers slipping is just as good a result for them. And then next up at the pick 19, the Rams. We have them selecting Kool-Aid McKinstry. They're kind of a slippage of DBs and not the ones we would have expected, with Tyrion and Quinion being the first ones off the board. But we went over it in the last mock. The Rams have a very thin corner room, and while they have young talent, we don't know much about that young talent. So you go ahead and you add, a first round draft selection at cornerback who could be your number one guy out of that young group. And that young group is going to stay cheap and they're going to continue to be with the team for many years. This will be a great pickup for them to grab.
Yeah. At 20, we've got the Steelers taking Amarius Mims, tackle out of Georgia. And it just kind of fit when we were doing this. We were talking about the Steelers maybe needing, quarterback, maybe needing corner, maybe needing offensive line. And then we realized that Broderick Jones and Amarius Mims were teammates at Georgia, and they actually played together on the offensive line. And Broderick Jones is their current starting right tackle, with Dan Moore being their current starting left tackle. And Broderick Jones was a left tackle in college. Amarius Mims is a right tackle. So yada, yada, yada. We have them taking Amarius Mims to put him on his natural right tackle side and then move Broderick Jones back to his natural left tackle side just to keep them a little bit more comfortable, as well as obviously pairing former college teammates being a comfortability thing as well.
Yep. And they are back-to-back drafts and back-to-back first-round selections. And, there's a nice little storybook part of that kind of leads some extra credence to that. And, they like their storylines, Joey Porter and all. Next up, with the Dolphins at pick 21, we have them going with Byron Murphy II out of Texas. After looking at the board and after seeing the departures from the team in free agency, they lost a guard, they lost both linebackers. They also lost Christian Wilkins. And so they managed to fill the biggest void of talent that just, departed. And they grabbed the best interior D tackle who fell to them at 21.
Yep. I could definitely see them actually taking Jackson Powers Johnson, whose name we have not called yet here, just because that interior O-line is a need for them. But I still think that Christian Wilkins was a bigger name than the guard that they lost, and replacing him would be a higher priority than replacing that guard. At 22, we've got the Eagles taking Cooper DeJean, the DB out of Iowa. It's a bit of a slip from where we normally have him going in the low teens, but it came out around the combine that Cooper's only top 30 visit was with the Eagles. And that was kind of a surprise to me because I always thought I had thought he was this kind of highly touted prospect. And I know whether or not it's because he's white, he is being projected as more of a safety than a corner, but he can play corner. And if the Eagles take him and need corner, he can play corner for them. And if they take him and need safety, he can play safety for them. And in a class where the safeties are a little bit weaker, despite the free agent class of safeties being extremely strong, I could see that being some extra value for them at this pick. At 23, we've got the Texans taking Johnny Newton, the defensive lineman out of Illinois. We have really had him go pretty highly in the drafts in these mocks. I think it was 9 for a couple of them and then 13 to the Raiders. Um, as much as I love what I've seen of him, I do think that his hype is dying down a little bit if it ever existed. And I think that the Texans are a pretty realistic spot for him. They did just sign Danico Autry, who is an interior defensive lineman, but he's a little bit older. He's 33. And I think that seeing Johnny Newton on the board here would really make him kind of think twice about whoever they were going to take. Um, and having a talented interior D-line prospect be able to sit behind a veteran like Danico Autry in the later first round may be more tempting for them than taking somebody like a Liatu Latu or another edge rusher to fill the void of Jonathan Greenard.
At pick 24, the Cowboys are kind of at a spot where we still think that they could be trading down. And there's good value in that because there's a lot of teams beneath them in this first round grouping that have similar needs. And I think that while, we could say the Bills would trade up for something or, the just actually any name after the Cowboys could trade up for something that someone above them wants. We have them going a little further down the board to get that extra draft compensation as the Lions look to just jump a division rival along with a couple other DB needy teams. And so we have the Lions trading up to draft Nate Wiggins, kind of one of the other shockers that we're having slip at the DB position, and the last one of that kind of first round grade bracket. So we have them moving up to get Nate Wiggins, and despite like their newest addition of Carlton Davis is there just for the 1 year. We don't know if they have plans to long-term extend him. They got a really good deal for him for the trades, and he could just play that like gap bridge role where, yeah, he's going to cover the ones, Wiggins is going to cover the twos, and let him transition to the NFL. And then a year later, he'll transition to covering ones in the NFL.
Yeah. At 25, we have division rival of recently picked Lions, the Packers taking Troy Fautanu, the offensive lineman out of Washington. With Bakhtiari being released, a spot at tackle has kind of opened up here for the Packers, and Fautanu projects as a guard, but did play tackle in college all throughout it. So if they decide that he would be better service to them as a tackle, they could take advantage of him slipping a bit due to his guard projection and still play him there, as well as maybe they do think he's more of a guard and they take him and helps fill out some of those spots in the interior of the offensive line that may be a little bit weaker. I could see them also being in the running to take Jackson Powers Johnson because their interior offensive line isn't super strong. But again, because of Bakhtiari, I think they lean the possible tackle, possible interior offensive line prospect over the pure interior prospect.
Yeah. At 26, the Buccaneers, we have taking Liatu Latu. They kind of continue to be that gray area of a team to mock, but with their, free agent spending of they bring back Baker, they get Mike Evans, they don't really have pure edge rushers. And I mean, Joe Tryon rushes, drops back. He's okay at both. We have them taking a pure edge to kind of have that presence anywhere along the D line. And next up at 27, we have the Cardinals, who really would have liked to have Latu fall to them. Really must have been holding their breath. And after seeing Latu go, they're just going to have to go with their next edge available because we've already seen them make additions all across this defense that is an absolute void on the defense across the board. They've added a D tackle, they've added a DN, they've added a linebacker, and they've added a corner. All of that considered, they could still add Danielle Hunter because they have the money to. We don't know anything as of now, as of recording, so we have them taking Chop Robinson. A little bit of a sneak into the first round for him, but albeit it's Chop Robinson and edge, a position of need for that defense, and they go ahead and secure him at pick 27.
Here at 28, we've got the Bills taking Braden Fisk, the interior defensive lineman out of Florida State. They still need interior defensive line. We mentioned that a few mocks ago. It has stayed true even through the first part of free agency. They don't really have the money to be throwing around at any top interior prospects or interior free agents. And I think that, even if Fisk may not have a first round grade from a lot of teams, he could sneak in. He had a solid combine performance. He ran, I think, a 4.78 and was just a really athletic prospect to pair with Ed Oliver. I think it would be alluring for the Bills to do that rather than kind of reach on anybody else they may kind of want, especially this late in the first round. It's close enough to a second round pick that nothing can really be a reach.
Yeah. Next up at pick 29, we have the Cowboys after trading back with the Lions. We have them selecting Jordan Morgan, the O tackle out of Arizona. They are going to be filling the void that Tyron Smith made when he departed from the team. And outside of linebacker or running back, I feel like this is the only other clear hole in the team. And they don't have that much cap space. So adding a tackle through free agency is very unlikely. And meanwhile, they could add running back or linebacker still through free agency because those are just lower cap percentage positions. Not to mention, there's other picks outside of the first round. So taking, the most likely, you want this guy to have a fifth year option kind of guy. You're not going to really want that for a running back or a linebacker because their contracts are more manageable. Take the O tackle who you can get for 5 years and hope that he pans out and is there for you those full 5 years is a much better option here than any reach on linebacker or running back.
Here at 30, we've got the Ravens, and they seem to kind of always be in this tough spot of being too far down the draft board to be able to take a top prospect at receiver, but always in a position of need where they can take a receiver and not hurt from it. And I think that they're still there. They're still in that position. But in this draft, there's a little bit more talent to go around at the position. And I think they would go with Troy Franklin, wide receiver out of Oregon, who we've had going around this spot, maybe a little bit earlier so far. But I think that he's their best option at wideout to pair with Bateman and Zay Flowers. He's a little bit taller than Bateman at 6'2", but still possesses his explosive athleticism alongside Zay Flowers. And I think that would be a nice jolt for the offense. Here at 31, we've got the 49ers, and they see a name that has slipped very heavily. I personally don't think he will fall this far in the actual draft. There just really wasn't a spot for us to take him that felt realistic, and that is Jackson Powers Johnson, the center out of Oregon. Now, he has positional versatility across the interior of the offensive line. I really don't think he would bump out as far as tackle just because he has shorter arms, but he could play either guard spot. He could play center. And even with a strong offensive line, the 49ers will, any team really, will always have a spot for a talented offensive lineman to join. And I think that with Jackson Powers Johnson slipping this far, it's another one of those things like with Brock Bowers, like with Dallas Turner, where it may not be the biggest need on the team, but it's definitely good value for the pick. And I think that they will absolutely take advantage if he slips this far.
Yeah, it's kind of like a shocking slip because we were suddenly at pick 30 and we were like, oh my God, why is he still here? Kind of situation. But we have a lot of guys who are that kind of second round, we haven't had in mocks before. Braden Fisk, Chop, just a good number of the names that have kind of, we just peaked, pushed them up in here. And this next pick is one of those names. At pick 32, the Chiefs, we have selecting Xavier Worthy, wide receiver out of Texas. After the season they had, wide receivers clear cut the need. And, we might say there's a certain player with a certain amount of speed who formerly wore a Chiefs jersey that this might remind us of.
John Ross.
We won't say it. John Ross last season. We won't throw that name out there for that bad juju to befall him.
Smith Schuster,
But
another former Chiefs receiver,
yeah,
baby. Let's
yeah.
go.
Actually, I was referring to MVS, the other former Chiefs wide receiver, because that would be his role effectively. He's going to step into that MVS role. He's going to be that deep shot guy once or twice a game, but this guy might actually catch it. So that I think will wrap up all of our comments on this first round mock draft. Anything you have to add to that?
No, I would like to move off this as swiftly as possible.
Nice.
No Taylor. Anywho, uh, the Chiefs puns. Yeah, this has been a fun, weird, kind of weird mock.
Yeah,
I
it's in a
mean,
gray area of time of when we're kind of doing it, scripting it, all of that. So forgive anything that you might hate from this mock draft.
yeah. Definitely let us know your thoughts in the comments before you go saying, "Oh, why would this player fall? Why would this player do this?" Go watch our other mocks as well because we try doing different things every single mock. We don't want to release 12 of the same exact video for all our mock drafts. That wouldn't be very good content wise.
No.
So still let us know your thoughts. Let us know if you would be happy with this player, just like regardless of if you think he'll be there. Would you be happy if this player ended up on your team? All those great things. Give us some insight into your team's biggest needs if we've completely misread them. And yeah, just let us know your thoughts. Stick around for the next one. I don't think this one's going to be on the timeline. This is going to be released as soon as we can get it out because of free agency. But
Yep.
in about 2
Well,
weeks, there'll be another one.
yep. And with that, deuces.
Deuces.